The war room was tense, the air thick with the hum of computers and the low murmur of officers discussing logistics. Captain Emily Harper, a decorated U.S. Army officer, scanned the holographic map projected in front of her. Northern Iran, rugged mountains, narrow passes. The intel blinking on the screen indicated a convoy moving through Kermanshah, a convoy carrying weapons that could destabilize the region. "Captain Harper," Colonel Donovan said, stepping into the holographic glow, "you've been selected for this mission because of your track record. It's classified, high risk, one woman. You get in, neutralize the convoy, and extract without leaving a trace. Any failure has consequences beyond your unit." Emily's jaw tightened. She had been trained for this. Years of tactical drills, survival training, and special ops preparation had led her here. But going in alone, against an enemy she didn't fully understand, was a challenge even for her. She nodded. "Understood, sir. I'll complete the mission." The equipment check was meticulous. Every bullet counted. Every strap, bandage, and battery meticulously packed. Silenced rifle, tactical knife, night vision goggles, emergency rations, satellite beacon, everything. She went over the mission in her mind again and again, memorizing every detail. By nightfall, she was inserted via stealth helicopter into the mountains. The cold air whipped against her face as she landed on a rocky plateau. The terrain was unforgiving, jagged rocks, steep cliffs, and shadowy canyons that stretched like dark veins across the landscape. She moved silently, the only sound being the crunch of gravel under her boots. After hours of climbing and careful reconnaissance, Emily spotted the convoy. 10 trucks, heavily guarded, engines humming low in the dark. She crouched behind a boulder, heart steady but senses sharpened, and confirmed her target coordinates via silent comms. Then, chaos. A sudden flare from a ridge illuminated the convoy and the surrounding terrain. Emily's eyes widened. That flare wasn't scheduled. Someone had compromised the mission. Enemy soldiers emerged from the shadows, moving fast, armed, and coordinated. The convoy stopped, engines revved in panic. Emily pressed herself flat against the rock as bullets began to shred the silence. Her training took over. Dive, roll, fire, duck. Each movement precise, instinctual. She returned fire where necessary, but avoided unnecessary exposure, knowing she had no backup. The ambush had been meticulously planned. Someone on the inside had leaked intel. Emily realized that every route she had planned, every safe spot, had been anticipated. She had to think fast. She couldn't rely on strategy alone. Instinct and survival had to guide her. She spotted a narrow crevice leading into the mountains, its entrance almost invisible in the darkness. Using the chaos as cover, Emily crawled into the crevice, bullets whizzing overhead. Her chest burned from exertion, her hands scraped raw against sharp rocks, but she pressed on, letting darkness swallow her as she climbed higher into the mountains. Hours later, she paused at a ledge overlooking the destroyed convoy. Smoke curled up from overturned trucks, flames licking the night sky. She was alone, but alive. The enemy had no idea she had disappeared into the labyrinth of canyons above them. The adrenaline ebbed, replaced by a creeping chill and exhaustion. She needed shelter. She spotted a small outcropping that would block her silhouette from the valley below. Crawling into the makeshift cover, she pulled out a minimal ration pack, enough for a few hours, and sat, pressing her back to cold stone. As she ate, Emily's mind worked over the events of the night. The ambush had been too perfect to be random. Someone had betrayed them. Who? How? These questions gnawed at her, but she pushed them aside for now. Survival came first. She would figure out the betrayal later. The night was silent but for the distant sounds of the valley below, occasional shouts, engine revs, and the eerie hum of the mountain wind. Emily wrapped herself in a thin thermal blanket, though it barely kept the cold at bay. Sleep was impossible. Her eyes flicked across the terrain, scanning every shadow, every ridge. Suddenly, movement. A faint rustle from above the ledge. Emily tensed, gripping her rifle. 2 figures appeared. Enemy scouts, lightly armed, moving cautiously along the mountain ridge. Her pulse raced. Any sudden movement could reveal her. She calculated. She had the height advantage and cover, but only a few seconds to act. She waited, counting silently in her head. 1, 2, 3, now. She dropped silently down a hidden path to the side, disappearing into the natural cover. The scouts passed, oblivious. Relief washed over her briefly, but she knew the danger was far from over. By dawn, she had traveled several miles through narrow ridges and hidden paths. Exhaustion threatened to slow her, but she pushed through, knowing the moment she paused too long could be fatal. She finally stumbled across a small stream. Its icy water cut into her gloves, but she used it to cleanse minor wounds and refresh herself. As Emily rested, crouched by the stream, her thoughts drifted to home, her family, her unit, her purpose. "I will survive this," she told herself. "I will finish the mission, no matter what." The mountains were vast, the enemy relentless, and the night unyielding. But Emily Harper was a soldier, and this was only the beginning of a battle that would test every ounce of her skill, courage, and determination. The sun had barely risen when Emily Harper forced herself to move again. Her body ached from hours of climbing, crawling, and dodging bullets the night before. Every muscle felt like it had been pushed to the edge, and yet she had no choice but to keep going. The mountains didn't forgive hesitation, and neither did the enemy. She followed the narrow stream she had discovered the previous night, using it as a guide and a source of water. The cold cut through her gloves and jacket, but she welcomed it. It kept her alert. Every sound was amplified in the quiet dawn. The snap of a twig underfoot, the distant roar of an engine, even the faint whisper of the wind through the rocky canyon. Emily paused on a high ridge, scanning the valley below. The convoy wreckage was visible, half-destroyed trucks smoking like dark beacons. Enemy soldiers were scattered among the debris, combing the area for survivors. She crouched behind a boulder, rifle at the ready, heart hammering. The operation had been compromised, but Emily had survived. That was all that mattered, for now. Hours passed as she moved cautiously through narrow passes and jagged cliffs, avoiding patrols and using the terrain to her advantage. Her rations were low, but she found scraps along the way. Berries, small game tracks she could trap, and the occasional cache left behind by shepherds. Every step required careful planning. One misstep, one snap of a twig could expose her to death. As the sun reached its zenith, Emily encountered a peril she hadn't anticipated, a landslide. The path she had been following gave way beneath her boots, sending rocks tumbling into the canyon below. She leaped to safety, rolling onto a narrow ledge, her hands scraped and bleeding. Adrenaline surged through her veins as she realized how close she had come to being crushed or stranded. She paused to catch her breath, pressing her back against the cool stone. Her mind was racing. Someone had betrayed her mission. Someone had known the convoy's route, the timing, and even her insertion point. She thought through every possibility. Could it be a mole in her unit, a leaked channel, or had the enemy simply intercepted communication? The questions were dangerous, but she had no answers yet. Night fell again, and Emily found a small shepherd's cabin tucked into a rocky alcove. It was abandoned, but it offered shelter. She crept inside, careful to check for traps or signs of enemies. The cabin was empty, but the supplies inside were enough to keep her alive for another day. A few cans of food, water, and an old blanket. She wrapped herself tightly, exhausted, but sleep was impossible. Her mind wouldn't allow it. Suddenly, a noise outside, a soft rustle, almost like a whisper. Emily's instincts kicked in. She grabbed her rifle and pressed herself into a shadowed corner. The door creaked open, and a small figure slipped inside. A boy, no older than 12, carrying a bundle of bread. His eyes widened at the sight of her, fear evident in his gaze. Emily lowered her weapon slowly, voice calm. "I won't hurt you," she whispered. The boy nodded, handing her the bundle, and pointed toward the mountains before disappearing into the night. She didn't understand his words, but the gesture was clear. Someone was watching, perhaps helping or warning her. She didn't have time to dwell on it. Survival came first. The next day, Emily moved cautiously toward a higher ridge. Her goal was simple: find a vantage point, gather intel, and plan her next move. But the mountains were treacherous. Loose rocks, narrow ledges, and sudden drops made every step a gamble. She had to move with care, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. As she navigated a particularly narrow pass, she stumbled upon another surprise: a small enemy patrol, unaware of her presence. Emily pressed herself against the rocky wall, heart pounding, calculating her options. She could engage, but the odds were against her. Instead, she used the shadows to move silently past them, holding her breath as their boots echoed near her. One wrong move, and her life would end here. Hours passed as she found a hidden cave, partially covered by foliage. It wasn't much, but it offered shelter and a chance to rest. She tended to her wounds, cleaned her rifle, and allowed herself a moment to think. She replayed the ambush over and over in her mind, searching for clues about who had betrayed the mission. Each possibility was more terrifying than the last. If the leak was inside her own unit, it meant the danger wasn't just outside, it was everywhere. The cave was quiet, but Emily knew the mountains were alive. Wolves howled in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of smoke from the destroyed convoy below. Every noise was a warning. Every shadow could hide a threat. Yet, amidst the fear and exhaustion, she felt something else: determination. She had survived the ambush, the mountains, the unknown enemies, and she would survive this too. Night fell, darker and colder than before. Emily set up a minimal camp inside the cave, using rocks and branches to secure her position. She wrapped herself in her blanket, rifle close, listening to the sounds of the wild. Sleep came in short bursts, interrupted by dreams of the convoy, the flare, the betrayal. But even in her dreams, she was alert, moving, surviving. As dawn approached, Emily made a plan. She needed to move closer to the convoy's site, not to engage, but to uncover more information. Someone had tipped off the enemy, and she had to find out who. Each step was dangerous, each move calculated, but Emily Harper wasn't just surviving. She was preparing to strike back, to complete the mission, and to expose the betrayal that nearly ended her life. Her eyes scanned the horizon as the first light touched the mountains. Smoke from the wreckage still curled into the sky, a reminder of the mission gone wrong. Emily tightened her grip on her rifle. She was alone, in hostile territory, betrayed and hunted. And yet, she was alive. Alive meant hope. Alive meant revenge. Alive meant mission accomplished. With that thought, she disappeared into the shadows of the mountains, every step taking her closer to the enemy, closer to the truth, and closer to her destiny. Emily Harper moved cautiously along the jagged ridge, every sense alert. The mountains had become a living maze of threats: loose rocks, hidden crevices, and the ever-present danger of enemy patrols. The wreckage of the convoy still smoldered below, a reminder that her mission had been compromised. Every step forward was a gamble, but she knew the only option was to keep moving. She paused to catch her breath, pressing herself against the cold rock. Her body ached from exhaustion, her clothes torn, and her hands scraped and bleeding from the rocky terrain. She checked her rifle, her eyes scanning the horizon. Somewhere down there, the enemies were regrouping, trying to piece together what had happened. And somewhere out there, someone had betrayed her. Someone had tipped off the ambush. Emily knew she couldn't fight everyone head-on. She needed information first. She couldn't trust anyone, not the locals, not her own intelligence team, not even the boy who had offered food. She had to rely on herself. Cautiously, she descended into a narrow canyon. The shadows were long, and the wind howled like a living thing, carrying distant voices. She froze. Footsteps. Not just one, but several. Enemy soldiers were moving through the canyon below her. Emily crouched behind a jagged boulder, calculating her options. A direct attack would be suicide. Retreat could expose her. She needed a distraction. Spotting a loose rock above the patrol, Emily shifted silently and dislodged it. It tumbled down, hitting another rock and producing a loud clatter. The soldiers below cursed and moved toward the noise, leaving their path exposed. Emily seized the moment, slipping past them with the agility and stealth honed through years of training. The canyon widened, revealing a small village partially hidden by the mountains. Most of the buildings were abandoned, but she spotted smoke rising from a distant house. Cautiously, Emily approached, using the shadows to remain unseen. As she neared, she noticed signs of recent activity: footprints, scattered supplies, and a discarded radio. Someone had been here, someone connected to the ambush. She crouched behind a crumbling wall, listening. Two voices carried through the air, speaking in Farsi. Emily didn't understand the words, but the tone was familiar, military, authoritative. She risked a glance and saw two men examining maps and radios. Her heart raced. This was a potential lead, a clue to who had betrayed her. Emily needed to get closer. She moved silently through the debris, careful to avoid broken glass and loose stones. One step too loud, and her cover would be blown. As she edged closer, she noticed markings on the ground, signs of coordinated troop movements, indicating a planned operation. Someone had known the convoy's route in advance. Her mind raced. Could it be someone in my own unit, or a foreign agent? The thought was chilling, but she couldn't dwell on it. Survival was priority number one, and gathering intelligence came second. Yet she knew these clues might be the key to completing her mission and exposing the betrayal. Suddenly, a shadow shifted behind her. Emily spun, rifle ready. A figure emerged from the darkness, a local shepherd, an older man, weathered by years in the mountains. His eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't run. Instead, he gestured frantically toward the village, then toward the mountains beyond, warning her of approaching enemy patrols. Emily didn't understand his words, but she got the message. She nodded, signaling gratitude. The man vanished into the darkness, leaving her alone again. Every second counted. She moved quickly, slipping through a narrow path that led deeper into the mountains, leaving the village and its dangerous occupants behind. Hours passed. Emily navigated through hidden trails, each one more treacherous than the last. Loose rocks, sudden drops, and narrow ledges tested her balance and endurance. Hunger gnawed at her, and the cold sapped her energy, but she pressed on. Every step brought her closer to safety and to answers. As night fell, Emily stumbled upon a hidden cave entrance, partially concealed by foliage. It wasn't large, but it offered shelter from the cold and a vantage point for reconnaissance. Inside, she tended to her wounds, cleaned her rifle, and allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The betrayal was a mystery, but the clues were mounting. Someone had orchestrated the ambush with precision. Someone had known her exact route. Sleep was elusive. Every sound echoed through the cave: wind whistling through cracks, distant animal calls, and the occasional crunch of footsteps outside. Emily's mind replayed the convoy ambush, the flare, and the betrayal. The questions were dangerous, but the answers were essential. She had to survive the night and the mountains to uncover the truth. Before dawn, Emily moved again, leaving the cave behind. Her route took her closer to a narrow ridge overlooking the valley where the convoy had been destroyed. From this vantage, she could observe enemy movements without being seen. Using her binoculars, she counted troop positions, vehicles, and makeshift barricades. Her mind worked fast, recording every detail. She noticed a pattern, an unusual movement of personnel, a trail leading back towards a hidden compound in the mountains. This compound could be the source of the betrayal, or at least a clue. Emily knew approaching it directly would be suicidal. Instead, she devised a plan to observe from a distance, gather intelligence, and strike if an opportunity presented itself. Suddenly, a shadow shifted behind her. Emily spun, rifle ready. A figure emerged from the darkness, a local shepherd, an older man, weathered by years in the mountains. His eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't run. Instead, he gestured frantically toward the village, then toward the mountains beyond, warning her of approaching enemy patrols. Emily didn't understand his words, but she got the message. She nodded, signaling gratitude. The man vanished into the darkness, leaving her alone again. Every second counted. She moved quickly, slipping through a narrow path that led deeper into the mountains, leaving the village and its dangerous occupants behind. Hours passed. Emily navigated through hidden trails, each one more treacherous than the last. Loose rocks, sudden drops, and narrow ledges tested her balance and endurance. Hunger gnawed at her, and the cold sapped her energy, but she pressed on. Every step brought her closer to safety and to answers. As night fell, Emily stumbled upon a hidden cave entrance, partially concealed by foliage. It wasn't large, but it offered shelter from the cold and a vantage point for reconnaissance. Inside, she tended to her wounds, cleaned her rifle, and allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The betrayal was a mystery, but the clues were mounting. Someone had orchestrated the ambush with precision. Someone had known her exact route. Sleep was elusive. Every sound echoed through the cave. Wind whistling through cracks, distant animal calls, and the occasional crunch of footsteps outside. Emily's mind replayed the convoy ambush, the flare, and the betrayal. The questions were dangerous, but the answers were essential. She had to survive the night and the mountains to uncover the truth. Before dawn, Emily moved again, leaving the cave behind. Her route took her closer to a narrow ridge, overlooking the valley where the convoy had been destroyed. From this vantage, she could observe enemy movements without being seen. Using her binoculars, she counted troop positions, vehicles, and makeshift barricades. Her mind worked fast, recording every detail. She noticed a pattern, an unusual movement of personnel, a trail leading back towards a hidden compound in the mountains. This compound could be the source of the betrayal, or at least a clue. Emily knew approaching it directly would be suicidal. Instead, she devised a plan to observe from a distance, gather intelligence, and strike if an opportunity presented itself. Suddenly, a shadow shifted behind her. Emily spun, rifle ready. A figure emerged from the darkness, a local shepherd, an older man, weathered by years in the mountains. His eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't run. Instead, he gestured frantically toward the village, then toward the mountains beyond, warning her of approaching enemy patrols. Emily didn't understand his words, but she got the message. She nodded, signaling gratitude. The man vanished into the darkness, leaving her alone again. Every second counted. She moved quickly, slipping through a narrow path that led deeper into the mountains, leaving the village and its dangerous occupants behind. Hours passed. Emily navigated through hidden trails, each one more treacherous than the last. Loose rocks, sudden drops, and narrow ledges tested her balance and endurance. Hunger gnawed at her, and the cold sapped her energy, but she pressed on. Every step brought her closer to safety and to answers. As night fell, Emily stumbled upon a hidden cave entrance, partially concealed by foliage. It wasn't large, but it offered shelter from the cold and a vantage point for reconnaissance. Inside, she tended to her wounds, cleaned her rifle, and allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The betrayal was a mystery, but the clues were mounting. Someone had orchestrated the ambush with precision. Someone had known her exact route. Sleep was elusive. Every sound echoed through the cave. Wind whistling through cracks, distant. Dawn broke over the jagged mountains, casting long, harsh shadows across the valley. Emily Harper crouched on a rocky outcrop, surveying the enemy compound she had been tracking for days. It was a small, fortified encampment carved into the mountainside, precisely where her instincts had told her the betrayal originated. Every movement inside the compound was deliberate, controlled, a sign that the person behind the ambush had planned this meticulously. Emily's body ached, hunger gnawed at her stomach, her clothes were torn, and every muscle screamed for rest. But there was no time for weakness. She had survived ambushes, treacherous terrain, and relentless enemy patrols. Now she had a chance to uncover the truth and complete the mission. She descended into a hidden canyon, moving like a shadow, each step calculated. Using the terrain, she slipped past guards and sensors, approaching the perimeter of the compound. Her eyes scanned for weaknesses, a poorly guarded gate, a loose fence, any opportunity to gather intel without being spotted. Inside the compound, she observed two figures speaking quietly by a table cluttered with maps and radios. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She recognized one instantly, Lieutenant Harris, a trusted officer from her unit, the very person who had briefed her on the mission. Betrayal. The word burned in her mind. Harris had leaked the operation, leading to the ambush, endangering her life and countless others. Emily's fingers tightened around her rifle. Rage surged, but she controlled it. Acting impulsively could get her killed. She needed evidence, proof of the betrayal, and a safe exit. Slowly, she adjusted her position, using a narrow crevice to peer inside the compound. She saw the radio communications, the encrypted messages, the maps marking her insertion points. Harris had orchestrated everything. Her jaw set. No one betrays my unit and survives unchallenged. Emily's plan was clear: gather evidence, escape, and ensure Harris could never threaten anyone again. Using the shadows, she slipped into the compound. She moved silently, avoiding patrols and cameras. She found a small office and accessed the radio, downloading all the transmissions and data that confirmed Harris's treachery. Her pulse raced as she packed the evidence securely, mission compromised, but justice within reach. Then the alarm. A guard spotted movement outside. Emily froze, weighing her options. She could fight, but she was outnumbered and still alone. Survival had always been her priority. She needed an escape. She sprinted toward the mountains, using the rocky terrain to her advantage. Bullets whizzed past her as Harris's men opened fire. Emily rolled behind boulders, her heart pounding, her mind calculating every move. She needed to reach the ridge overlooking the valley to signal extraction. The mountains fought back. Loose rocks, narrow ledges, and steep cliffs threatened to end her escape at every turn. But Emily Harper was relentless. She leapt across a wide chasm, narrowly catching the edge with bleeding hands. Her rifle clattered to the ground, but she grabbed it mid-fall, firing at the pursuing enemies with precision. Harris's voice rang out from the compound, shouting orders in desperation. Emily's heart sank momentarily, not for herself, but for the betrayal that had cut so deep. But she refused to let it break her. She pushed forward, adrenaline and instinct guiding her through the jagged terrain. Hours passed as she navigated the treacherous mountains, climbing higher and moving faster than fatigue should have allowed. The enemy was relentless, but Emily had the advantage of terrain and knowledge. She used the natural cover, the crevices, and the darkness to evade capture. Every step was a battle. Every breath was a victory. Finally, she reached a hidden plateau overlooking the valley below. From here, she could see the convoy wreckage and the enemy compound shrinking in the distance. She activated her beacon, signaling extraction. Within minutes, the distant hum of helicopter rotors filled the air, a sound that brought relief like no other. As the helicopter descended, Emily took one last look at the mountains. The betrayal, the ambush, the struggle for survival, it had all brought her here, alive and victorious. She had survived the impossible mission, exposed the traitor, and escaped alive. The helicopter lifted off, carrying Emily away from the danger. Harris's compound grew smaller, swallowed by the vastness of the mountains. She clutched the evidence tightly, knowing that when she returned to base, the traitor would be brought to justice. Emily exhaled, allowing herself a rare moment of relief. Her body was battered, her mind weary, but her spirit remained unbroken. She had survived betrayal, ambush, and impossible odds. She had completed what few could, emerged alive, victorious, and ready to fight another day. As the helicopter flew toward safety, Emily looked down at the mountains below. The landscape was harsh, unyielding, and unforgiving, but so was she. Every scar, every cut, every sleepless night had forged her into something unstoppable. She was a soldier, a survivor, and a force to be reckoned with. Her comms crackled to life. Colonel Donovan's voice, tense but relieved, filled her headset. "Harris, do you copy?" "Loud and clear, sir. Mission compromised, but target neutralized. I'm heading home." The mountains stretched beneath her, shadows of the past fading with each passing second. Emily knew the journey had changed her. The betrayal, the ambush, the struggle for survival, it had tested her beyond anything she had imagined. But she had endured. She had survived. And as the helicopter carried her home, Emily whispered to herself a vow that would never fade. "I will survive, I will fight, and I will always come back." The impossible mission had gone wrong, but Emily had escaped alive, a legend forged in the shadows of betrayal, chaos, and fire.